Hello and welcome to episode 56 of the Footy with Fletch podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Chloe Dalton. Chloe is an Olympic gold medalist representing Australia in rugby sevens. Chloe is also an AFLW player with the GWS Giants. Chloe has played 32 AFLW games and kicked 8 goals. Hello, Chloe. Thanks for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm really good, Fletch. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you've got a really interesting background. You were born in Singapore but moved to Sydney when you were 3. What is it like to sort of know that you were born in Singapore?
Yeah, it's something that because I was so young when we moved home to Australia, I don't actually remember being there as a little kid, but it's been really nice as a family as we were growing up. We actually had the chance to go back and visit. We had a number of family friends who still live there, and we've got friends from Singapore who now live all across the world, and it's really cool to have that connection. I actually last year got to go back to Singapore for the Singapore Sevens, one of the stops on the World Series circuit, and it was awesome just to be there to, I guess, be at my second home and go and see the rugby sevens and meet a whole range of different people. And it's always quite special when you can say that you were born in Singapore when you're there to visit.
And what sports did you, I guess, play growing up? Because you've got a number of different sporting codes that you were a part of.
Yeah, I played a whole range of sports as a kid. Once we'd moved to back to Australia from Singapore, I grew up on the Northern Beaches in Sydney and just absolutely loved sport. It was a really big part of our family. So I played T-ball and baseball, touch footy, did athletics and cross country, nippers at the beach, a whole range of different sports. And it was when I was about 11 years old, I think, that I started playing basketball for the first time and just fell in love with the game.
And when did you sort of first start playing footy?
Footy wasn't until I was, gosh, I think I was almost like 23, 24 years old when I first started playing footy, which was crazy. Just as I said, being from Sydney, I don't think it was a huge sport when I was a kid. It's pretty amazing to see the way that footy has grown in New South Wales in particular, but I never really understood the game and didn't know a lot about it. So it wasn't until I was, yeah, a fully grown adult that I started playing footy. I really wish it was something that I started playing as a little kid because I often see the 18-year-old draftees that come and join us at the club and they just like you can just tell when someone knows footy and has been playing footy their whole life.
The transition to playing footy is really interesting as well because you switched codes in 2017 alongside your fellow rugby sevens teammate Brooke Walker, joining the Blues VFLW program. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like to play footy for the first time?
I think I probably looked like a bit of a headless chook out there. I thought I thought I was doing the right things and running and working really hard and trying to support my teammates. But I think because I didn't know the game, I was probably really reactive to what was going on. So I was probably making tackles and thinking that making tackles was a good thing. And not that it's not. Obviously, there's some people in AFL and AFLW that are amazing at tackling, but I think I almost was prioritizing that over winning the footy first when I was first learning because I didn't know how to read the game. So it was a real process over watch. I used to go down and read the newspaper at my local cafe when I was living in Elwood and just like try and learn as much as I could about footy, about like the way that people spoke about it in the lingo and who were good players to watch and learn from and things like that. I just tried to absorb as much information as I could so I could learn a lot about the game in a short space of time.
And obviously, you're an Olympic gold medalist, being a part of Australia's gold medal winning rugby sevens team in 2016. What was that like for you, I guess?
It was quite an incredible experience. It was just the most amazing thing. I was 7 years old when I watched Cathy Freeman win gold at the Sydney 2000 Olympics. And as a kid, I decided that I wanted to win my own gold medal like Cathy. So to fast forward to be part of that group in 2016 in Rio and to beat New Zealand in that gold medal match 24-17 and to stand on the podium with my teammates and have my very own Olympic gold medal put around my neck was just, it's the most surreal thing. I think sometimes it doesn't feel real that we actually achieved that.
And you've played basketball, you've played rugby sevens, and you've played AFLW. Do you have a particular favourite out of those three?
I do often get asked this, and I don't often tell rugby people, but I really love footy. There's something about Aussie rules. I love the combination of skills that it requires. I think as I said, I didn't understand the game as a kid, so I don't think I could appreciate it, and I could never understand why the weird Victorians were so obsessed with it. And then once I started playing, I was like, that's why. Like it's a beautiful game, and I genuinely really do love playing it.
And then in 2018, you were selected by the Carlton Football Club. What was it like to be selected by the Blues?
It was a really, really special experience to play with Carlton. I immediately, like as soon as I walked into the club, you could understand what a rich history the club had and just the membership base and what that club means, not just to the players and staff involved, but to the whole Carlton community. And I really feel quite privileged that that was my first taste of Aussie rules footy. It was a really special experience to be involved with a club like that. And I absolutely loved my time there. We played in the grand final my first year. We won't talk about the scoreline of that one. But then the second year we were on track. We were playing finals again, but it was a COVID season, so it got cut short. So yeah, loved my time with Carlton, and we had a fair bit of success as a group back then as well, which always makes it enjoyable too.
And what do you remember from your AFLW debut?
We played North Melbourne in Tasmania and we got pumped. So it wasn't actually a great game. And I remember they gave us like a framed photo of like a photo from my debut and they gave it to the debutants, which was a really special memory, except it had my stats at the bottom. And I think I like maybe got like two disposals and one tackle. Like it was just embarrassing. I was like, I actually can't believe this is in a frame photo. Um, Funny to reflect on, but yeah, we didn't have a great game against North that day.
And your first season, you played every match. What was that, I guess, sort of like for you?
Yeah, I wasn't sure how I was going to go because I was still relatively new to the game. I had a season of VFLW under my belt, but I was still so raw and still trying to learn the game. I think my first season, I probably was still trying to work out where to be and when. I think I developed throughout the season, but I really felt like in my second season that's when I made a huge amount of progress. I think having an off season between the two, I did a huge amount of work with one of the development coaches, just watching a lot of vision and trying to learn the game better. And so I really felt like in my second season, I felt like I was making a lot more of an impact than I was in my first.
And your second season in 2020, you finished runners up in the Carlton Best and Fairest. What was that like for you?
It was it was actually a really cool moment. I think it was weird. I so clearly remember the presentation because it was during COVID. I'd moved back home to Sydney. I was living with mum and dad, and we watched it in the lounge room, and it was just the most bizarre award ceremony. But I think that moment was quite a big one for me, just because I felt like the whole time I transitioned across, I was always called the cross coder, and I felt like I was always trying to prove that I could play the sport. And I think people always kind of just put me in this box as the rugby player, and so even though it was just runner up in the best and fairest, I think it was a very small acknowledgement that I guess, shown that I could play footy, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Does it sort of get, I guess, a bit annoying getting referred to as a cross-coder and continually getting talked about your basketball and your rugby background? Does that get a little annoying for you, Chloe?
I don't think I'd say annoying. I think sometimes as athletes, you almost get put in a box where, like, the media journos or commentators, even, they kind of they know maybe one or two backstories about you, and that's kind of how you get described. So I don't think it's ever coming from a bad place. It's almost like you just get put in the box and that's what you're labeled as. And so I think for me, not that I was like fighting hard against being called a cross code or anything, but I think there was a sense of just wanting to show my teammates, I guess, that I wanted to be a good footy player and be a good teammate rather than just someone coming across. from a different sport, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And then in 2021, you decided to sit out the AFLW season to focus on the Tokyo Olympics. What was that decision like for you to make?
Yeah, it was a really tough one. So John Manenti, who was the coach of the Australian Rugby Sevens team at the time, called me in, gosh, it must have been early 2020. Feels like a lifetime ago. It must have been around early 2020. And he said, would you be interested in trying to make the team for the Tokyo Olympics? And I said, oh, I've signed on with Carlton for another season. I don't know if that's unrealistic. Do you think that I could do both sports? And he said, yeah, like let's see if we can make it work. And so I was actually paid part-time to be an AFLW player and part-time to train for rugby sevens while living full-time in Melbourne. And I'd kind of alternate days of training. And for me, it was always that temptation to go to another Olympics was a really big one. And once the AFLW season got cancelled due to COVID, I made the call that I wanted to move home where the rugby sevens program is based. And I think within 24 to 48 hours of hearing that the AFLW season was cancelled, I saw a tweet. A friend texted me a screenshot of a tweet saying that the Olympics was cancelled or postponed for Tokyo anyway, and that they were going to be pushed back a year.
How did you find that return to rugby sevens?
Yeah, it was a bit of an interesting one actually after going across to footy. I think rugby's a game that I've always known because I grew up in a rugby family. So I have a really great understanding. I like to think I have a good understanding of the game. So in that sense, the mental load of it felt easier than when I was trying to learn footy all the time. Physically, it's a horribly demanding game, rugby sevens. So physically, it was incredibly hard. But I really loved being back in the environment. I felt really refreshed being back. It was an amazing group of girls, and I really enjoyed being back with that group.
And then in 2022, you signed with the Greater Western Sydney Giants. What was the decision and reasoning behind signing with the Giants?
Yeah, so once I moved home to Sydney to pursue the rugby sevens dream, I just was really comfortable being back home. I loved my time in Melbourne, loved my time with Carlton, but I felt like I'd kind of, I guess, ticked the box of living interstate, and I just was really enjoying being back home and around family. And I've got a little niece who's 2 years old, and just I guess being there for those moments to have the opportunity to play footy in Sydney with the Giants and have the lifestyle of being their family was something that I thought was really, really appealing. And I knew a few girls from the Giants who spoke really highly of the club and thought it would be a great fit.
And what are some of, I guess, the differences between the Blues and the Giants as clubs and as footy programs?
I think it's really interesting being part of a club that doesn't have the really long history. I think something that's quite cool about the Giants is the club has the ability to almost craft their own story. I think it's been really cool to see examples like the Giants media team, the way they've kind of set up this personality of being quite cheeky and like pushing back and not having that really formal approach to social media and storytelling. So I think it's really cool to be a part of a club that can make their own story. And then I think at the same time that comes with challenges of being in Western Sydney, being in a state that is dominated by other sports. We do know that footy participation is definitely growing and things like that in Sydney, but it does come with challenges around membership and attendance and things like that. So I think it's definitely an area of growth still for the Giants.
And you played 6 matches across your first 2 seasons at the Giants due to some injuries. What was that sort of like to deal with, I guess?
Yeah, that's been really, really hard to deal with. I don't know what it is. I don't know what I've done, but I just have had a bit of a hard run over the past few years with injury. And it's just, I found it really mentally challenging to process. I think there's obviously a lot of athletes that go through injuries, and it's just hard, I think, in sport because if you do everything right and you try as hard as you possibly can, you're never guaranteed the results or the success or anything like that. And I think it's really hard about injuries. It doesn't matter if you're doing all the right things. Sometimes you just have bad luck and end up in a really horrible situation. And so I found it really, really hard, that part of my career. I find it hard to have the conversations with my family to tell them that I've got another injury that when I have to tell my teammates, I feel like I'm letting my teammates and the coaching staff down. It's been really hard. I like to think that I've developed more empathy and understanding for other people going through this process. But yeah, sometimes it's just tough.
And then in 2023, you played every match during the season for the Giants. How did you find that at an individual level last season?
Yeah, that was really refreshing to me to almost prove to myself that I could still do it. Because I think there's doubts that sometimes swirl around in your head when you have a couple of injuries about whether there might be something wrong with you. So there was huge relief that came knowing that I could make it through a full season injury free and be feeling really good. It was a challenging season because it was only a few weeks out from season that Berner, my head coach, said, "Oh, actually, I'm keen for you to play in the back line." And prior to that, I'd played on the wing or on ball in the midfield, never played in the back line before, so was kind of thrown in the deep end a little bit with a brand new role, and it definitely took me a few rounds to find my feet there, and I think I was still really learning my craft as a defender last season. So yeah, towards the back end of the season, I definitely felt more comfortable, and particularly coming into the off season and pre-season this year, I felt a lot more comfortable back there.
And what is it like to, I guess, play as a defender and be in the back line?
It's been an interesting change for me because I'm quite an attacking player. Because of probably my rugby background, I have that's kind of always been my strength in a way, is my run and carry off the ball and being able to create hopefully scoring opportunities inside 50 off my run. And to switch mindset to being really accountable for another player was weird to get my head around. So I think for me, it was just the challenge of getting the balance right of being defensive enough and being accountable, and particularly when you're in the red zone in D50 and things like that, but being able to know the right times of when I could run off and create an attack when I was good to do that, and when I knew that my fellow defenders could cover for me if I made a mistake.
And unfortunately, you will miss the 2024 AFLW season due to undergoing back surgery. How disappointing is that for you?
Yeah, it's been really difficult. I think similar to what I touched on before. It's just I've struggled to process this one. I think I've been probably a little bit in denial about the whole thing before I was even having to go in for surgery. It's really nice now to be pain free because I was in a lot of pain before the surgery. So it's really nice to get a positive result from the surgery itself. But to think that I'm missing a whole AFLW season is really devastating, and to not be there alongside my teammates is really hard.
And I guess, do you have a particular like off-field role this season? Are you sort of down on the bench helping? What does this season look like for you?
Yeah, I chatted to Berner about that, our coach. He chatted about potentially a coaching type role, but for me, because as I said, I haven't grown up playing footy, it's not something I would feel comfortable doing. I think I know the game enough as a player for myself, but I don't think coaching is something that I would see myself doing. So I think for me, it's more of a mentor role for some of the younger girls. I think it's something I hope I do relatively naturally, just checking in on some of the younger girls who are brand new into an elite high performance environment. And also some of the girls that are in rehab as well, because that can be a really isolating and lonely place. So just getting around some of those girls and hopefully building a nice little community in rehab when the going gets tough.
And how have you found the Giants' performances so far this AFLW season?
Yeah, so I thought the round one performance against the Dogs was amazing. The way that Ailish kicked the fastest goal in the history of AFLW was amazing. I think a lot of the commentators and crowd and social media viewers were surprised by it for us as a group, though she's been doing it the entire preseason. So we kind of were just waiting for her to have a moment like that. And I thought the second half in particular, the way there were just so many different scoring opportunities from different avenues from the Giants girls, and it was really nice to see them definitely playing a real Giant style of play. I think in the second round against Richmond, that first half, I think there was probably some big impacts from the wind. It looked like the ball was kind of getting stuck along the boundary and along that far wing. This was just me watching it from home, but I think then the girls almost went a bit into their shells and didn't play that attacking rip style of game and looked to go through the corridor. But I thought the second half they definitely did that, but it was just unfortunately a little bit too late to get that one back against the Tigers.
Well, they're definitely looking good at the moment. And off the field, you started the Female Athlete Project. Tell me a little bit about this and how that sort of all came about.
Yeah, so I started the Female Athlete Project in 2020 from the garage of mum and dad's place during one of the COVID lockdowns. And I just really wanted to create a space to share the stories of female athletes. I think it's so often they haven't been given equal coverage in the media. And I wanted to create a space for people to understand their stories and for female athletes to become household names. And I think we've seen the landscape shifting, and I think there's amazing people covering women's sport, and credit to you. I know you have a lot of AFLW players on your podcast. Like, I think there's some awesome people covering women's sport, which is really, really cool to see. But yeah, it's quite amazing to see the way TFAP has grown. We've got over 250,000 followers across our social media channels. And yeah, I think people just genuinely love women's sport and want to be a part of it.
And do you, I guess, have a top five of female athletes that you've either met or interviewed as part of that project as well?
Oh, top five is hard. Who would I put in my top five? Anna Meares would be up there, the cyclist, because she just is an Australian icon. Lauren Jackson, I got to chat to her recently for the second time, and that was quite amazing to see her shift in perspective during her comeback. Who else would be up there? Naomi Fox. I got to interview her recently when she returned home from Paris, and it was so special to have the chance to chat to her. Vanessa Lowe, the Paralympic long jumper, she was definitely up there. And who else? Who's number five? Gosh, there's been a lot. There's an episode coming out really soon with a sailor called Lisa Blair, and she chats about her solo sailing adventure around Antarctica where she almost died. And it was full on, but yeah, it was quite amazing to have the chance to chat with someone like Lisa, who just does something so different to a normal sports person.
Well, it's great that you're promoting women's sport and getting to share those stories. So well done on that. Moving on to something a little bit lighter, I guess. Who would be the most annoying teammate at the Giants? Is there anyone in particular, Chloe?
I'm gonna give it to Zali Goldsworthy.
Well, that is interesting indeed. Do you have a favourite teammate at the club?
I reckon Jazz Grierson would be up there. Big Jazz Grierson fan. She's great.
Do you have a go-to beach in Sydney? Because obviously the weather at the moment in Sydney is a lot better than down here in Melbourne.
I do. I love the beach. Fairlight Beach isn't too far from me, and it's definitely one of my favourites on the northern beaches.
And do you have a favourite non-AFL or AFLW professional sports team?
Oh, it's a great question. I'm actually a big Sydney FC fan in the A-League Women's.
I thought you would say the Rugby Sevens team, but obviously they're probably up there as well, I would imagine.
They are absolutely up there.
And just finally, do you have a favourite piece of advice that you've been given by someone in life or in your sporting journey?
One that comes to mind is a bit of a random one, but it always stuck with me from one of my basketball coaches when I was really young. He was talking about the gym, and he said, you've got to, if you want to be a great athlete, you need to fall in love with getting stronger. And I thought it was just really good advice for young athletes, because I think sometimes we can get really fixated on training itself and not around all of the other things that can make you a great athlete. So that was something for me. And since then I made a really conscious decision about it. And since then I've always loved my gym workouts.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and all the best of luck with your recovery, and hopefully we'll see you out on the field sometime in the near future.
Thank you so much, Fletch, for having me. I appreciate it.